All around Europe, we keep hearing reports of new airport expansions.
The airport we see behind us is full.
Schiphol is te klein geworden.
At London Gatwick, London Heathrow, Barcelona. And the aviation industry tells us that these airport expansions are good for the economy.
Economic growth,
Drive the economy.
Good jobs, meer competitief.
Vestigingsklimaat.
But what is it like if you actually live near one of these airports? Would it actually bring all the benefits the industry claims compared to all of the negative impacts? This is a story of people versus corporate power, a story of the resilience of people trying to protect their homes and their local community. At the moment, it's not looking good, with the aviation industry and the tourism industry pushing the social fabric of our cities and the climate to the brink. But the story's not over yet. We can still decide how it ends. Taking the plane is the most polluting form of transport that you can take. While other transport sectors, and actually in fact most other sectors, are declining their emissions, aviation emissions just keep going up, and fast.
What we're seeing just in recent years is the growth of a new type of flyer, the ultra-frequent flyer. Around half of the new flights or seats that you create are captured by people who fly 6 or more times per year. And those people make up just 3% of the population. And what we know about that group is that they fly principally for leisure, not because they necessarily need to get somewhere, simply because you can.
Wordt gevlogen voor €45 naar Milaan om boodschapjes te doen in het weekend, bij wijze van spreken. Dat kan allemaal niet in dit klimaat.
Schiphol is te klein geworden voor al die mensen die willen reizen.
Building the infrastructure that our country needs.
So can aviation actually continue to grow in this way? European aviation plans to double its passenger traffic by 2050. That means depleting their carbon budget by 2026.
There's other sectors out there also vying for part of that carbon pie. There's critical industries like the steel and food production. Is it fair, or does it make sense for this tiny group of just 3% of the population to be consuming vast amounts of this new air transport capacity that we're creating?
The reality is that the airline industry and governments use economic arguments to say that airport expansions will bring economic growth and economic benefits to regions. However, for an increasing number of regions, this argument doesn't make sense at all.
Here in the UK, we're seeing expansions all across the country where strong claims were being made about magnificent benefits for the economy, but we really don't think that those claims stack up quite the way that they're being presented.
the airport we see behind us is full, and that is to the detriment of the UK economy.
Both the airlines and the airports are powerful lobbyists or influencers. It is an industry, particularly at the airport level, where significant profits can be made. The incentive is always for growth, for more passengers moving through the airport.
You have this second runway at Gatwick, there's going to be a third at Heathrow. It's born out of desperation to get growth, isn't it?
We can meet our environmental targets whilst giving this crucial boost to airport capacity, which we need to drive the economy.
We see a wider context in Europe at the moment where decision makers are desperate for growth. Productivity has been low across Europe in the wider economy for some time. That's squeezing government budgets, and they're looking for easy wins. They're hoping that a quick expansion of an airport will deliver some economic growth, and the industry are very happy to feed that narrative to present themselves as an easy win.
Check out this map. These airports are all planning expansions. These cities are already saturated, at a point where increased air traffic will bring little to no additional benefits to the economy, or in some cases might do more harm than good. For example, let's take a look at London. London has been in the news a lot this year, with the government allowing new expansions to happen at Gatwick, Heathrow and Luton airports.
The planes that land at those airports overfly hundreds of thousands of residents of the city, causing noise disturbance, affecting their sleep and ultimately affecting their mental health. The Mayor of London has opposed airport expansion for several years now. The national government is actually sort of pushing kind of against the wishes of the actual residents of the city that is most affected by these expansions.
I will, as the mayor of this great city, use any tool in the toolkit to stop a third runway happening.
Ultimately, these views are outdated. Impact studies, potentially from the 90s, were being used to justify expansions taking place now in the 2020s. The evidence of there being a sort of wider economic benefit from air transport growth is quite questionable.
The main argument that's being used is that it will bring more business to the global capital city and it will bring an increase in tourism. But the numbers don't actually add up. Actually, business travel only accounts for 20% of airline traffic across Europe. And unsurprisingly, with all of us using more video conferencing, these numbers have only gone down since the pandemic.
75% of European countries have seen a decline in business travel since the pandemic. The largest declines are concentrated in the UK, Belgium, and particularly Germany. And these are countries also that typically see an outflow of tourism as well, because most of the tourists on those planes are flying out of the country, not flying in. They're taking their money to Southern Europe or further afield. A decision by government to allow low taxation of air transport and not to tax carbon properly is a conscious decision to encourage people to spend their money outside the country rather than to stay at home and spend potentially in the domestic tourism industry.
Meanwhile, more flights means more passengers arriving in cities that are already being overburdened by over-tourism.
There's a clear question there about the fairness of who benefits from those incoming tourists versus who loses out, and that's one of the reasons that we see active protests on the streets.
Local communities are pleading with their governments to slow down the influx of tourists and make sure that the benefits of tourism are actually felt by the local communities, which currently is often not the case. With 73% of flights being operated by low-cost carriers and 80% of tourists coming in by plane, the airport is directly fueling Spain's over-tourism crisis. The Spanish organisation Zeroport is one local group that's fighting against this growth, and they're seeing some successes. There's been a resistance against the harms caused by Barcelona El Prat Airport for a long time, but this reached a new peak in 2020 when the government announced that there would be an extension of the airport.
One of the most successful events was the big demonstration that took place in 2021 that actually managed to put on hold the expansion of the Barcelona airport, that brought together a lot of people from different movements, from the farmers movement, the housing movement, worker unions, climate movement, and we all came together in Barcelona to say no to the expansion of the airport. Thanks to our pressure, now it has actually been postponed to 2032. It's a small victory, but then again, for us, the victory will be when they decide to not expand the airport, because the government is announcing that they still intend to expand the airport even more to still increase the amount of passengers visiting Barcelona every year, which means more tourism for Barcelona, and you're still putting more tension on an already saturated city.
There's been a couple of studies saying what wondrous benefits the expansion is going to bring to the economy there, but it's very obvious to many people living in and around that area that the over-tourism that they're experiencing comes with significant downsides, extreme growth of house prices, pricing people out of the market, increasing their rents, and that the quality of the jobs that they've been getting back from the tourism industry has not been that high quality. Those communities that you could argue that they feel gaslit by propaganda economics that defies their own lived experiences.
We believe this promotion of touristification is actually not benefiting the majority, but instead deepening inequalities. Right now, we are already seeing a housing crisis in cities like Barcelona, Madrid, and other big capitals in Spain. Housing prices are going up, and people have to move out from their home because housing investment funds are more interested in renting the apartments to tourists. But the majority is just being expelled from the public spaces, expelled from their houses. Local shop owners are also being forced to close because there's big chains of businesses that are actually able to pay higher rents.
A very large chunk will obviously go to the aviation industry, the airlines and the airports. That share of the pie, of the tourism spending pie that they take, has been growing over time because people's trips have been getting shorter and shorter. And when you take a 3-day hop to Southern Europe instead of a 2-week trip, you spend more of your money with the airlines or as a share of your trip than you do in the local economy.
The airport is Catalonia's biggest emitter, generating 8 million tonnes of CO2 per year. That's actually more than double the rest of all of Barcelona's emissions put together if we took away the airport. The expansion would lead to an increase of at least 33% in emissions, contradicting the Catalonia region's climate commitments.
The area where the El Prat airport is located is the delta of the Llobregat River, where it meets the Mediterranean. It's a very fertile area for food production. There's a lot of smallholder farmers. It it's also a site for many birds nesting and a biodiversity hotspot. However, this has already been destroyed quite a lot by the presence of the airport, and already by the expansion of 2004. It is in an area of Natura 2000, which means that this area is actually protected. The expansion was to be compensated by the company that did the expansion of the airport, and this compensation, up to now, 20 years later, has not taken place. So this is something that they will need to figure out and solve before they can justify any further expansion. And we believe that might be one of the reasons why the expansion has now been delayed for 4 years.
Now let's have a look at Amsterdam, a city that's experiencing a double problem in the sense that it's reached saturation point, meaning that more tourists aren't going to bring more economic benefits, and is experiencing an over-tourism problem.
We zijn vandaag in de Zaanstreek, bij Amsterdam in de buurt. Heel mooi, met veel polderlandschap hieromheen. In 1982, toen mijn man en ik hier kwamen wonen, een rustig gebied. Er waren nog niet zoveel vliegbewegingen als nu. Amsterdam is natuurlijk overlopen, ook door toerisme. En die hadden op een gegeven moment zoiets van, wij gaan al die toeristen proberen naar de buurgemeentes te krijgen. De balans is doorgeslagen naar het massatoerisme. En dat daarmee het mooie van wat er neergezet is, onzichtbaar wordt. Maatregelen die dan van een openbaar gebied, waar wij allemaal erg van houden, een gesloten gebied wordt als een soort museum. Het is dus gevolg van de goedkope vluchten dat toerisme er is. Maar hoe hou je ze tegen? Want er komen busladingen toeristen uit Amsterdam. Toeristenbureaus verdienen eraan. Maar wij moeten die schade weer ophoesten.
Amsterdam Schiphol Airport is Europe's third busiest airport. Not only does it funnel millions of tourists into Amsterdam's already cramped city centre, it also serves as a transit hub for transfer passengers, meaning that these people aren't actually stopping to spend money in the Netherlands, they're just flying through, only contributing noise and air pollution.
De transferpassagiers betalen hier geen belasting. Dat geeft ons dus per passagier 4 keer uitstoot. Ze komen hier landen. Dan stijgen ze op, dan komen ze hier terug, landen en dan stijgen ze weer op naar verdere bestemmingen. Het was in 1982 een rustig gebied met 1 baan. Er waren nog niet zoveel vliegbewegingen als nu. Het was 200.000 ongeveer. De plannen werden gesmeed eind jaren 80. Begin jaren 90 was hier veel protest tegen de aanleg van die polderbanen. Omdat wij wel wisten dat ons leefmilieu eraan zou gaan. Inmiddels met een extra baan zitten we op 500.000 vluchten. De polderbaan gaat door mijn voortuin en de Zwanenburgbaan door mijn achtertuin. Als je 744 vluchten, allemaal landend, met heersende winden hebt. De lucht wordt constant verscheurd door vliegtuigonweer. Je hebt nooit meer rust hier.
To make matters worse, an increase in air traffic means an increase in air pollution. The data shows that ultrafine particles can cause serious risks to human health, and actually that people living within a 20-kilometer radius of an airport are at risk of developing serious health conditions.
De lucht wordt gewoon verontreinigd elke keer als er een vliegtuig overkomt. Je ruikt hier af en toe kerosine. Je ademt allemaal hele slechte lucht in. En er wordt slecht geslapen hier. Als jij 10 keer 's nachts gewekt wordt, dat put je uit. Ondertussen gebeurt dat gewoon elke nacht weer, dat er nachtvluchten zijn.
If you capture all of the different costs arising from the expansion of Schiphol Airport, the noise, air quality, traffic and over-tourism impacts, growth is not in the societal interest. Actually, shrinkage could even be a net social gain when you consider all those wider factors.
Schiphol houdt Nederland in beweging en maakt zo een klein land groot.
De luchtvaart is kritisch. Gooi je die weg, dan is die weg en komt hij niet terug. En dat drijft ook echt de Nederlandse economie en de welvaart. En het gaat echt over de toekomst van de luchtvaart en de toekomst van Nederland.
Ze kijken niet naar de schadelijke kant van die hele luchtvaart. En hebben gewoon iets van, wij willen de grootste zijn. Zij hebben een visie, wij willen de grootste luchthaven van Europa worden. Waarom willen zij zo groot worden? Ik bedoel, in dit kleine postzegelland. Ik blijf hier wonen omdat ik hier geaard ben. Ik heb hier 42 jaar met mijn man in harmonie geleefd. Hij zit in dit huis. Mijn vader heeft dingen verbouwd in dit huis. Ik kan niet zonder. Mijn kinderen zijn hier groot geworden. Al die herinneringen zitten hier.
In 2022, the Dutch government recognised these problems and put a cap on the number of flights coming in and out of Schiphol Airport.
Vorig jaar 20 maart heeft de rechter in Den Haag uitgesproken dat ons mensenrecht is geschonden. Daar is dus nu wel beroep tegen aangetekend, waardoor wij weer in procedure beland zijn. Maar uiteindelijk gaan we dat winnen. Hoopvol maakt me eigenlijk dat Schiphol een vergunningenmoeras is. Ze werken zonder natuurvergunning. De rechterlijke macht die zal moeten zeggen van je moet je aan je eigen wetten houden. Ik heb de SOS opgericht in 2018, de Saanse Omwonenden Schiphol, om mensen bij elkaar te krijgen. Er zijn veel meer bewonersgroeperingen gekomen. De hoop is gevestigd op de rechterlijke macht.
Airports are becoming an emblem of the pursuit of destructive growth at all costs. Local communities are suffering from the health and environmental impacts of this airport expansion. All the while, airlines and big international companies are making huge profits. However, many communities are making their voices heard and standing up to this narrative of endless growth that turns its back on its people. The people are saying no, as we've seen in Barcelona. The judges and courts are saying no, as we've seen in Amsterdam. And now even the banks are saying no, with the European Investment Bank prohibiting its funds from being used in support of airport expansion.
The growth of air transport is going to be a redefining issue over the next sort of 2 decades. What we're not trying to do is to claim that there is never a benefit from airport expansion to the economy. But we're really encouraging decision makers to make a much more critical assessment. And I think that's a fair ask when you're facing an issue as serious as the climate crisis, especially when it comes to very high pollution, high emitting industries like aviation. One area where I'm hopeful is that this issue of air transport getting a free ride, not paying its fair share in taxes, not paying fair carbon taxes, VAT or fuel duty, should get addressed in the next year or 2. We're starting to see some realisation from decision makers that maybe this panacea of supposed economic growth that we're promised is perhaps not what it seems.
We know that the battle will be long. We know it's going to be a long struggle. We've also seen how there's been a response from many movements. So yes, I am hopeful, and in any case, even if the struggle will be long, we will continue organizing against it. The expansion of the airport of Barcelona is a good example of something that is really connecting many issues in the city. I hope Barcelona can be an example also for other cities, because it's not only about Barcelona. Aviation is a global problem.
Taaie strijd, maar ik kan het niet meer niet doen. En dat heeft te maken met dat onrechtvaardigheidsgevoel. Dit vind ik ook onrecht gezien de komende generaties. Dat is een soort onrecht, dat is het strijden waard. Dus ik blijf hier. En ik blijf vechten. Dat is het enige wat ik kan doen. Mijn hoop is dat de mensen het winnen en dat het grote geld onderspit delft. We gaan het zien. Ik blijf hoopvol.
The coming years will show how this fight will continue. Will we succeed in choosing people and planet over profit, or will we keep listening to the fairy tales that the aviation industry is telling us so they can keep making their profits?